Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah? Okay, great. So I'm Ben Wirz. I'm a partner with Brighteye Ventures. Brighteye is a ed tech-focused European venture capital fund. We invest in companies that help people learn and grow at seed and Series A stages. And I'm really excited to be joined here by Rodrigo and Maria. One of the things I've learned as an investor in ed tech companies for over a decade now is that whereas everybody really likes to know things, few people actually can find the motivation to learn them. And so I think Rodrigo and Maria represent two different approaches to actually helping people along and using technology to really improve the process of learning. And so I'm excited to dive into those approaches today. I'm going to start by just asking, the theme of today is a virtuous circle of continuous improvement. So the idea of basically making learning more integrated, more continuous in people's lives. And so I'm going to ask, just by virtue of who's sitting next to me, Rodrigo to go first, and then Maria to go next in terms of introducing themselves and specifically talking about what their differentiated approach to that is. And so Rodrigo, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Benoit. Thank you for the invitation. What we do in ODILO and our approach to continuous learning. In ODILO, what the concept we are doing, or the category we are creating, we call it Create Your Own Unlimited Learning Ecosystem, which is helping organizations, we work with schools, universities, and companies, to create a customized unlimited learning ecosystem for all their possible learning programs. And the way we do it is we help them by giving them technology so they can create a Netflix, Spotify platform alike, but configure specifically for them and the program. And from that platform, they can provide access to their learners from content from over 7,000 different companies that partner with us. Ebook providers, audiobook courses, videos, educational apps, all in this one single platform customized for them. And then using this content to natively create all possible learning experiences, onboarding plans, development plans, career plans, integrating this content from all those content providers very easily. So they have a platform where they can offer all ways of learning to all their learners, and this way pushing this concept of continuous learning adapted to everyone.
Yeah. And so I'm, like I said, Maria Ortiz. At 7th Generation Games, what we do is we looked at first, kids, they will do a worksheet and they get really frustrated and you never see them try over and over again. And we thought, what if you could take the motivation that you see in video games where they will play 500 times to get incrementally further and apply that to education? So that kind of is where we started from. And we started by building out our own games, looking at ways that we could incorporate education and engagement. And then from there, we started actually working with other companies who were saying, can you build out games for us around our curriculum? And we found so much in education. Everyone was always, especially educational gaming, trying to reinvent the wheel. And so every new game, they'd start from scratch. And we thought, what if we can just build a better way and a better engine to do that? And so that's what we've been doing at 7th Generation Games, is building out not just games, but a platform to make educational games so that when new folks come onto the market, it's not just, I have to start and bring in this whole team to code everything, but to actually have a lot of the infrastructure already built out so that we can streamline the process for other people. Because I think education, and hopefully what's happening today, isn't this zero-sum game where one of us is going to win, but we really need everyone to kind of be part of that. And so we thought, instead of just trying to work on this niche, how can we facilitate that at a larger level? And so that's what we do.
Cool. Okay, great. Well, no, I think both of them. I think it's really interesting because, again, motivation is such a key issue in education, right? Like just making people, or allowing people to kind of stick with it long enough to actually learn the things that they want to learn or want to know. I think ODILO's approach ODILO is much further along in this journey. You now are offering customized learning ecosystems to 170 million users across school districts and corporations around the world. I'm really interested in sort of what does good engagement look like for you? How does the product actually encourage people to continue along that journey? And what is it that you're looking at to make sure that it's actually working?
Perfect. When we think about engagement, we're a B2B company, B2B2C, so we think in two parts, no? What the organization wants to get, what their engagement and the plans of learning for the organization, and then for the user, no? And depending on the different needs or how they are configuring their ecosystems, we adapt these metrics to the different needs, no? For example, when we are working an onboarding plan for a company, our key one is how fast we can get the team to be ramped up, no? If we work with compliance, how we can get people to do compliance learning without the manager needing to push you, no? Or if we do independent learning, what the percentage of the employees in the company doing learning, not because they are told to, because they want, no? As you mentioned, no? Or if it's in a school, what's your reading or writing level, no? So, but even there are different metrics for different needs, the whole concept is what you mentioned, and it's trying to make this simple and as you mentioned, trying to make people that want to learn really easy and frictionless this process to learn, no? So the way that we are approaching first is giving all possibilities to companies. If you want to get engagement, maybe in a company, there are people who don't have time for courses or they don't want to do it, no? Offer them podcasts, videos, summaries, or they are more collaborative learners, create a community in your company, no? So it's ensuring everyone has multiple options so they adapt to this person, no? Then if I have something adapted to you and not the other way around, there will be high chances that you will engage, no? And the second is removing friction, because from I want to learn to do it, there's a journey, so removing everything, so it's super one click and you have the content, one place, simple, attractive, so measuring all the things that happen within I want to learn and I'm learning, and working constantly to reduce them, no? Those are the two areas that affect all the different metrics from all the different learning needs that we measure.
Okay, and I mean, what have you kind of built into the product to make that engagement loop happen? Like, yeah.
It's learning of how you are accessing content and trying to get a journey which is super fast for you, no? Okay. You know, if you enter in a platform and you don't get what you want, you automatically don't have second chance, no? And then if we see, for example, you are interested in a particular topic, or you're interested in a particular way of learning, you're, for example, more about courses because you have certification interest, or you're more sharing with others, it's right away building a journey that is exactly for you, no? And keeping the platform updated, no? So that's the work to ensure when we have a user that they are coming back, that they are recurrent, and working with all of that, no? It's the way you can change a little bit the concept of traditional learning in digital with low percentage of engagement to ensure most of the people is active, no? But it's a continuous work, and also adapting the platform every month in every organization to what we learn, no? Because everyone has different needs, and until you are not in the organization, you cannot see really what's engaging, is the levers for engagement, no?
Cool. Okay, there's like music going on in the background. Okay, that's great. For me, I mean, you guys are balancing education and entertainment, which is a tough balance in some ways. You know, what key metrics are you looking at, or what are you looking at to make sure that it's working, that people are not just having fun, but they're learning, or they're not just learning, but also having fun that keeps them learning longer? And so, we'd love to hear how you balance that.
So, I mean, our biggest one is educational outcomes, right? Because if you're creating an educational software product, it's really cool if it's engaging, but if it isn't actually producing real outcomes and improving learning, then you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem, I always say. Like, it's cool to say this is a learning game that kids are playing, but if they're not actually learning anything at the end, then it's just really a game with maybe numbers thrown in, right? And so for us, the biggest thing is learning outcomes, kind of objectives. And then we use engagement that we're able to see, you know, where are the kids dropping off? Where are we losing them? Where are we able to then draw in and say, look, kids are struggling at this part, and build out content on that, and then be able to also create ways that we're embedding the learning within the game. So if you get it wrong, it's not just more problems, right? But you don't know how to solve that. So how can we take them within the context of the game and provide them opportunities to learn those skills and practice those skills and build that out? So for us, like I said, engagement is really important, but only in that it ties into actually producing learning outcomes. And for us, I think when we look at engagement, what we're trying to get is kids wanting to learn and go further. And sometimes people say, well, how do you know they're learning stuff because they really care about the learning, or they just want to play the fun game part that comes next? And I don't really care if they didn't know how to do fractions before and now they do, then we've succeeded. And so for us, like I said, everything has to be about learning outcomes, because, I mean, otherwise you're just creating games, not learning games.
And so, just wondering, is like, what is it that's most important for you? Are you looking to take people through a curriculum, or is it like a per session thing, or like what is it like? What are you looking at mostly?
So it depends on the game, right? Yeah. We do want to make sure that we've got a whole bunch of different games. We have done over 20 games to date, so all of them are on different things. We try not to we don't say a full curriculum because we want kids to be able to actually finish the games and get excited and be like, I completed that and I understand that. So a lot of it is standards aligned in terms of here's a specific set of standards, we're covering that, and then we go to the next, because that also helps the teachers in terms of the data. And we talk a lot about data, and your experience might be different, but we get a lot of people asking about it, but then we know how often people are accessing the reports, and it's not nearly as much as they're asking us for them. But if they can say, hey, I know that the kids completed this game, so they've mastered those standards, that gives the teacher something to work with too, as opposing to need them to go in and log in and look at the data, which some do, but I think teachers are super busy too. So anything we can do to help educators advance faster and not need to go do one more thing is super helpful. So for us, it really depends on the game, but we make sure that there's a very clear objective. So if you've mastered that game, you've shown mastery of those standards.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, no, I mean, as an aside, we're invested in one gaming company. I will say it's the most data-driven company that we're invested in. It's unbelievable. As a player of games, I never realized quite how much work goes into actually just making sure that people stay and each sort of aspect of the game. So that it's interesting to see. So I mean, I think one reason people come to conferences like this is to figure out what's coming next. And so I'm going to ask you both to see a little bit more about what market dynamic do you see kind of defining the space in the near future, and how your product's going to evolve to accommodate that. Maybe I'll start with Maria this time. I mean, what do you guys, what do you see coming, and what are you kind of building in to deal with that?
Yeah, I think a lot of people talked about wanting better ed tech and things, but the last 2 years really illustrated how important that is. I think a lot of ed tech companies, as strange as it sounds, like the last 2 years business-wise were actually successful because all of these people thought, wow, we talked about needing better educational technology, but now that we've got so many remote learners, we have to be prepared for that. And you can get caught off guard once, but you can't get caught off guard again, right? So I think that's a big part of it. For us, we're seeing a shift away from just wanting to do a game and build this out to actually a whole bunch of folks saying, how can we as an organization, not us, but other organizations, get into that space? And so that's kind of what, for us, has done a shift from we were making our own games to now we're doing a platform to enable other companies to streamline game production, because it just made sense. And there's really not something in ed tech. There's been a lot of pieces together, but as opposed to an engine, instead of needing to hack Unity and say we're going to use this and this, to actually have a platform. So that's kind of what shifted for us, and I think you're going to see more and more, not just educational software out there, but really this driven toward a purpose and classroom use.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. And what about you, Rodrigo? What do you see coming, and how's the product evolving?
Well, one of the things we see from our customers that they demand more is data. So we also she was mentioning a lot about data, so I hope can partner and learn from what you are doing. But organizations, they have, specifically when we talk about the schools, for example, and we work with Ministry of Education, they had very limited data, no? So they were working on programs and considering only a few things, if people engage or use the content, but they didn't know, for example, if a particular book was good for a reading, planning, and aids, or they didn't know if flipped classroom was working better than learning by projects in another area. And right now, we see a lot of interest for organizations to start making decisions based on data. No? It's been part of this maturity of them working more in digital, and now they have all these different sources, and need to start making evidence-based decisions and data, and that's pushing us and everyone to bring this level, and I think it's a very good opportunity there. The way we are working on that is trying to bring with them all different ways of learning, not only also incorporate the learning you do in a class or in a particular course, but your whole day learning, and how we can get information about everything, and how can we measure and certify your knowledge, not so much from a particular exam or certification that gives you a point of knowledge, but what's your level, and this is not yes or no, you have more levels, you have more ways of learning, how we can get learning in your spare time, in different areas, etc. That's a nice journey that we are working now on data to understand more continuous learning as the key part, and your continuous knowledge and skills in your whole life, not so fixed. So we see a lot of interest and now from organizations, and that's something we are pushing very hard to be ready.
That's cool. So how do you do that? Like, so if you're not necessarily pushing the assessments through the platform, or maybe you are, I don't know, but how can you tell what people know without, quizzing them?
Yes, the thing is, in our case, we integrate everything in one place. So we have all the players, so we know everything you are doing. No? We can measure if you are listening, for example, you have a negotiation skill path, so we are seeing everything you are doing. We have our artificial intelligence part, and we tag all our content experiences, and they have a part of negotiation included. So if you are, for example, listening to a podcast, we have some questions, so we can see if you get it or not. No, that's a way of learning. Or maybe you read an ebook and have some questions, so you participate in an experience. Those are different ways of learning in your day-to-day life that we can bring to your learning passport, no? And you can show the world that you know negotiation, no?
Right.
And because most of your knowledge, you didn't get it formally, no? And so that's the way we are working, and trying everyone to bring all their learning in one place, getting this data, and from that, you can also start certifying, no? For example, we are certifying teachers for digital competencies without doing a single exam, just because we have all the data about what they do in class. So if you're a teacher doing this, and this, in different platforms, we can certify. Right. You don't need exams, no? And that's an evolution we see, no? Like how we can certify, which is miles away from where we are now.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I mean, people talk about just-in-time, or I think about just-in-time learning, but there's also, I guess, just-in-time certification, right? Like you don't have to go through an exam. That's great. Cool. Okay. So I assume that some folks out here are, I don't know, can you raise your hand if you're an entrepreneur in the audience? Can you raise your hand if you're an educator? Any investors? Okay, all right, cool. So there's a nice balance of that. If you have advice for, I guess it's mostly entrepreneurs and investors interested in either building or investing in ed tech, what advice would you give them? And so I guess Rodrigo, start with you. Like you're 8 years into the journey now. You guys just announced a big fundraising round, which we'll get into in a second. But like, what advice would you give?
I'm really afraid of giving advices because we failed so many times, so it's constantly. But two things that we were talking a lot internally, for example, and I think it's relevant for those doing product in tech is, first, and we remind this ourselves constantly, doing more education than tech. No? And now post-COVID is bringing that to reality. No? What products are really adding value more than technology as those that are engaging, no? in this situation. No? So focusing on, if I'm not adding value because I'm adding digital, I don't have an edtech product. No? Sometimes we can be in love with our product, but we need to really focus on, are we adding real value? Are we doing the 10x better than the traditional way? If not, this is cool, but we are not going to have engagement. No? And some things we didn't work because of that. No? We love the product, but then it was not very useful for the teacher. No? They wanted the traditional part, so that was not something we can do. No? And in our case, the second is maintain ourselves humble, because in the case of learning, you need to know what your space. No? When you go, for example, to a school, or we tell a manager to do a boarding plan, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm basically give you tools to do your work, no? Which in our case is how we can get this teacher to do a better STEM program. No? So we can save time to be more time with the kids, better content, better experiences, but not tell them what to do. No? Which is something it takes sometimes we try to tell people, I'm going to show you how was education. No? No, I'm going to give you tools because you are the expert, and I'm going to be listening to you. No? Those are two things that when we didn't do it, we tried to be very clever and tell you what to do. Didn't work, and we were in love with the product, didn't work. So maybe that's useful.
Great. What about you, Maria? What advice would you give?
I think one thing is knowing, especially in ed tech, it's a really long game, right? Because it takes a long time to get into classrooms, to get teachers to use it, to get them to adapt your thing, to actually get data that shows that it works. So I think that's one thing, is just however long you think it's going to take, like multiply that times 3 to 5, right? And that's how long I feel like it takes in ed tech. And I like you were talking about schools, right? Talk to educators really, really early. So once we were at an event and someone said, at the time we were doing math game, I do math. And we said, what kind? Oh, K-12. Do you have a background in it? No, but it's K-12 math, so anybody can figure it out, right? And the way that you know things as an adult is very different than the way things are taught. And without getting that understanding and input really early on, you're going to create things that fail. And even our developers, we have them going into schools and working with schools, and we say, watch the kids, see where they get stuck, see what they like and don't like. And that often is different from what we thought it would be. And so taking that and understanding it and then shifting your product around that, as opposed to trying to force people into something that you think that they want versus listening to them. And that's really shifted what we do in a way that made it much better.
Okay.
Another good one.
Yeah, no, I mean, just any particular advice, I don't know, we've invested in a number of companies, for a long time, honestly, that sell into K-12. I think selling to K-12 is a particular sort of art and science in and of itself. So I don't know, what have you found that's been successful? And then we'd love to hear you as well, but yeah.
So we shifted actually away from selling into K-12, and now we're selling into organizations that are already distributing in K-12.
Okay.
But for us, I think that makes sense too. When you're a small company, if you're a startup, you can either try and compete with these big, huge players. You can find ways to maybe partner with them.
Yeah.
And for us, instead of trying to fight for this share of the market with them, what we've started doing is looking at folks who already are distributing, who have curriculum and content and want to make it into a game.
Right.
And that makes it a lot easier for us, because schools are super slow to adopt. Because if they use your thing, they implement it, they get teachers to onboard it, it doesn't work, or you don't exist in 3 years, because that happens a lot with small companies and startups, right? Then they've wasted their time, and so they're really conservative because they're taking children's education seriously. And if your product doesn't work and you're doing an app that sells cheaper yoga pants, that's fine. If your product doesn't work and you're using 10 hours a year out of a kid's curriculum time and it doesn't work, you've stolen that kid's 10 hours. So I think that's one thing, is K-12 is a really, really hard market to sell into, because, we're entrusting education, for kids.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, what about you guys? You guys have sold not just into schools, but into government-level ministries, so we'd love to hear how you tackle that problem.
Yeah, one of the things he mentioned is patience is key, especially in K-12 market, which I would like to ask you also your opinion from an investor point of view, because dynamics are very different, you need more time, etc. But then it's, when you get it, it's really sticky, those products, in the case of that, is being patient, look for adding value from the first time. We were not trying to do the whole country or the whole full program, textbooks, etc. at the first time, not focusing on something that they need, and from that point, showing them every month with data that we were adding value, and working from that was great. In our case, we tried to go different governments and ministries at the same time, because and adding the first project there and then start growing from there. It's been the thing we were doing, and being patient, looking for good partners, and in our case, it's pushing data, and full evangelization about this, how the money you are saving, how you are increasing engagement, the learning metrics, how they are improving, and then being patient, and then it will go, But understanding is different to other industries, And what's your view about EdTech investors when you think this level compared to other B2B, that maybe are more faster, but maybe not so sticky?
I think that's the main difference, honestly. Like a lot of people, I think there's a misconception about what a good ed tech company is, and that it has to be super different from what a good tech company is. Generally speaking, actually, when you look at the numbers, it's not that different, but there is the one key difference for companies that are selling into K-12 and universities in particular is often your sales cycle is longer. It just is. And so as a result of that, you don't see the kind of like 10x in a year growth that you might see in a different industry. I've never seen that in the decade plus that I've been investing in ed tech, with the brief exception of actually the COVID period. There was like this massive spike when people just needed a solution, and so all of a sudden there was a window of opportunity there. But generally speaking, you just don't see massive adoption. The flip side of that is the contracts, like the renewal rate on contracts is ridiculous. In traditional SaaS, 120% annual revenue retention is considered to be, off the charts good. In education, you can often see 200% plus, annual revenue retention, because once you get the contract, it just doesn't change, and people are much more willing to give you more business, right? So that's the trade-off, and so I think for us, we're happy to take that trade-off, but I think for other investors, they may not be comfortable. I think, yeah, so sorry, thanks for letting me get on my soapbox for a second there. But yeah, so just because we have about 5 minutes left, and we're in a really interesting fundraising environment, and there are a lot of sort of entrepreneurs and investors here. Would love to hear more about just what you guys are seeing, and you know what it's like from the entrepreneur's perspective. You know, for context, I'm sure many of you guys know this, but the inflation rates have gone up. You know, as a result, multiples in the public markets have fallen quite a bit, and multiples in private markets have also come down a bit. And you know, the general prognosis is economic growth will be slower than it's been in the last couple of years going forward. And so that's made the fundraising environment just a lot less predictable than it was, say, in 2020 and 2021, when money was a little bit easier to come by. And so you know, anyway, we'd love to hear your perspectives on that. I'll start with Rodrigo, since you guys, just announced. Yeah.
In our case, when we just announced our fundraising, process was not so different to other times. What was different, obviously, is the questions you receive. No, it was more important. We received more questions about the unit economics, which is more important, about we're profitable, about how you're going to maintain profitable margins, how you're going to keep your growth being efficient. So that was something, obviously, the market now is putting more attention to. And also we think, and maybe one advice on something was relevant to us is, as this is uncertainty, it's going to be tougher for funds to bet on companies. So that's why you need to build a very good relationship very early on, no? So because they need to do a bet, so every time they'll have more reasons because of markets, etc., to not to do it, no? So if you start maintaining a good relationship with them a long time ago before you need fundraising, and you saw progress with them every quarter, and you see this consistency, when is the moment you are giving them more tools and more opportunities for bet on the company, no? And maybe in the past they can do faster options, faster bet, and now I think you need to do all this work to build this conviction for fans, no? And that was something we learned in our fundraising, because those that knew ODILO for a long time, and these our projects were more convinced to go with us, no? It was more difficult to get someone new, no? So that's why I think in this environment, this together with this profitability, units, and sustainable growth are quite relevant.
So, sorry, just can I double check, and then I will turn it over to Maria. But just on one thing, I mean, really specifically, in your previous rounds, were your financial models kind of taking, for each round, was that round taking you to profitability, generally speaking? And did that change at all in this round?
Yes, but we are a company that, because of our business, a lot of governments, etc. We've been profitable before that, cash flow positive after we see a year. So it's been quite a lot of the story the whole time. We didn't have to change it. So we were lucky. Our business was a little bit around that, with not so much. But it was more consistent now. The margins, the ECB, the PRAUD, and every market, we were not profitable in every market. Every single market country past the profitability was in the deck, which was not in previous rounds, absolutely. And we see that for the questions you receive. No? So.
Okay, got it. And sorry, Maria, I would love to hear your perspective.
You know, well, and my take, and you said a word that drives me crazy, and I don't mean, but it was never easy, right? It's always hard. It's not going to be, it wasn't super easy 2 years ago. It's always hard, at least in our experience. Every time you're fundraising, you're like scraping and clawing, and it's not for the faint of heart. And I think for us, and I just said the data, you know, we're a woman-owned, Latina-owned company, and so money has never been thrown at people like me, to be quite honest. And so I think for us, when we look at fundraising, we're looking at both traditional fundraising. We also had connected with Wharton Impact Ventures about doing a community round and looking at other ways. And so I think as many ways as you can look at to be bringing money in has really kind of been our focus, because you know, they act like there's lots of money, bags of money being thrown around, but I have been waiting for mine and it hasn't come. So I think when I talk about fundraising, I think the one thing I say is no matter what, and people say this should be really easy, it's never, ever, ever easy. And I did have a friend who raised far, far for it, like exponentially more money than me. And he said to me, like, no matter how much it is, it always is hard. And so I think, you know, it's probably, he said this is hard when you get your first 500,000 versus 50 million. Which I'm hoping, but maybe at the end you have 50 million versus 500,000, so it's probably better. But I think that's one of the things is people sometimes underestimate or feel like it's easier than it is because they've gotten a lot of messaging. And I I have to say I disagree, but when you get the money, you feel good.
I think you're absolutely right to point that out. I know we only have 12 seconds left, but I will editorialize a bit on this. So we do a funding report every year around money in edtech, particularly for European startups. And it went up 3x last year, and so everybody's like, oh, this is amazing. But actually, if you looked at the number of deals that got done, that didn't change. And so what it meant is that for people who raised money, they raised bigger rounds, but actually the amount of people getting funding didn't change very much, and that's true globally as well. And so I think you're absolutely right that the typical experience is basically getting told no. We as investors have to raise money. That's also our typical experience, so that builds empathy to some degree with our entrepreneurs. But ultimately, obviously, if you can stay in it long enough, you figure out a way to make it work. So good luck to all you guys. Thanks so much for sharing your insights, and yeah, thanks for being here. I think we're good. Yeah. All right.